Bob Woodward is still bringing the receipts after all this time. The book is based on confidential documents, notes, transcripts, firsthand accounts from participants. It is an unprecedented look behind the scenes at Joe Biden, unfiltered, profane. He likes to drop the F-bomb.
The journalist we hear here is Jamie Gangel from CNN, who somehow obtained a copy 1 week before publication of Bob Woodward's latest book, simply called War. War is Woodward's usual behind-the-scenes look, with incredible access at the 3 wars that Joe Biden has been central in. The war in Ukraine, the war in the Middle East, and the war for power in the USA. Hello, I am Michael Anderson, one half of the Two Grumpy Old Men on Ukraine blog and podcast, and today we are having a look at some of the juiciest bits in Bob Woodward's new book, because they are to do with President Biden's views on Ukraine and on Vladimir Putin. Predictably, Joe Biden does not like the little KGB guy in the Kremlin, and in private, the American president cannot hide it.
So Biden and his national security team, Woodward writes, obtained this treasure trove of intelligence. They call it the crown jewels. It even includes a human intelligence source inside the Kremlin, the most sensitive source. And what Woodward writes is what they knew were the exact battle plans, everything about how Putin planned to invade Ukraine ahead of time. You also hear, again, unvarnished, what President Biden thinks of Vladimir Putin. Here we go. He says, quote, that effing Putin. Putin is evil. We are dealing with the epitome of evil. So you're in the room behind the scenes as all of these things are.
But maybe more surprisingly, Biden has some choice words for his former boss, President Barack Obama, exactly when it comes to Ukraine. To a friend, Biden directly lays a lot of the blame for the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022 on Obama and his weak reaction to Putin's invasion of Crimea in 2014. Quote, "They fucked up in 2014, that's why we are here," says Biden. "We fucked it up. Barack never took Putin seriously." Biden continues, quote, "They should never just have let Putin walk in there. The US did nothing. We gave Putin a license to continue." And then Biden shouts, "Well, I'm revoking his fucking license." End of quote. We can also read about how Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in 2021 totally dismissed the warnings the US government gave him about a forthcoming Russian invasion. In an unprecedented spying coup, the Americans had obtained the actual Russian invasion plans, and Vice President Harris shared those with Zelensky, who nevertheless, quite astonishing looking at it from today and all that has happened since, flat out dismissed the American warnings. When Harris came back to Washington, she told Biden that she was worried it might be the last time that they would ever see Zelensky. To help me analyze President Biden's harsh remarks and accusations and swear words, I'm joined by Brian Bonner. Brian is my co-grumpy old man on this blog, but he was also the editor of the Kiev Post during this whole period, from long before Putin invaded Crimea in 2014, through the presidencies of Obama, Trump, and into Biden's rule. During that whole period, and quite a while before most other Western media woke up, the Kiev Post and Brian were warning that the US, the West, was not doing enough to help Ukraine and deter Putin.
Yeah, overall, Brian, I suppose the first question should be, is Biden's very harsh criticism fair? Obama didn't do anything. He didn't take Putin seriously?
Oh, yeah, that's obvious. I mean, to step back, thank God for Bob Woodward. I know he has his flaws, and he's not everybody's idea of a great journalist. He's actually why I did get into journalism, because he's still going at it, and he was going at it when I was in junior high school. So listen, the quotes ring true because they mirror exactly what happened in reality. Obama didn't care about Ukraine, didn't even care enough to come to Ukraine in this entire term, outsourced it to Joe Biden. There were rumblings, if you read Biden's VP memoir and other reports, that he was not happy with the policy of basically just letting Putin walk all over Ukraine. But now it's come out, obviously, in a more direct and graphic way. It doesn't surprise me a bit, knowing how everybody knows Biden has a temper and speaks this way, actually. So this doesn't surprise me a bit. I'm a Democrat, and unfortunately, I feel conflicted about voting for Barack Obama twice because as an editor in Ukraine of the Kyiv Post, I saw that he didn't care. He was completely weak, and that actually any of his Republican opponents, John McCain or Mitt Romney, would have been much stronger. And there's a big argument to be made that Putin, 2022 happened with a chain of events that started with Obama, continued with Donald Trump, and now brings us to today. But Michael, the one thing I don't understand is if Biden felt this way, why was he so half-assed and half-measured, when the full-scale invasion happened? And he's going to go out that way. And I think part of his legacy, unfortunately, is that, yes, he did help Ukraine defend itself in its hour of need during the full-scale invasion. But as everybody has said now already, it came too late. Deterrence happens before the invasion, not after the invasion. That is just defense. And he still looks like he's going to go out to January 20th, not giving Ukraine a full range of military equipment that they need, not removing the restrictions on them. So there were a lot of interesting things. Bob Woodward certainly knows how to sell books, doesn't he?
So what you're also saying here is that this might, Biden now throwing Obama under the bus is also an attempt to make his own policies, his own hesitancy maybe look a bit better?
Yeah, there's some shaping of history there, and it might be a get even moment because, as everyone knows, that Obama sidelined Biden and favored Hillary Clinton, which led the Democratic Party to the disastrous presidency of Donald Trump and losing there. But I also think that, this is just what Biden, even though he's been a politician for more than 50 years, he speaks kind of too much and too undiplomatically. And I believe he genuinely holds these emotions. I mean, it wasn't just Obama that came under his wrath. It was Benjamin Netanyahu, Vladimir Putin. And I think if you went out on the street, if I went down, on the street in Kyiv, and I'd say, do you believe that Russia was thinking about using a tactical nuclear weapon, dropping a bomb on Ukraine down in Kherson? Most people would say, yeah, I believe it. And I do believe it. I mean, I believe that there was, if you do go back, if you match up the quotes with the timeline, there was a big push from China's Xi and India's Modi and Biden and basically the whole world, people who don't agree on a lot of things, but they agree to send a message to Vladimir Putin that you're not using nuclear weapons, period. So I find it all believable and sad and tragic, and that's why we are here.
Well, you just the way you end there saying that's why we're here. I mean, I find a couple of the quotes from Biden very brutal on Obama. He says, actually, like you just said, Biden, when he goes on this tirade against Obama not reacting to Crimea and afterwards not taking Putin seriously, he ends up by saying that is why we are here, meaning that is why Putin invaded Ukraine. This is something that Biden says to a friend, according to Woodward. This is something that Biden says to a friend in December 2023. That is why we're here, because Obama didn't react.
was completely right. Look at what happened. It was slap on the wrist sanctions, wink wink. Let's continue to do Nord Stream 1, Nord Stream 2, continue to trade. Let's have Russia as part of the world community. It was just it was sheer Western hypocrisy, and now the West is going to pay the price for it. Ukraine is going to pay the biggest price, but the West is going to pay the price. And Jens Stoltenberg, the former NATO chief, in his exit interview, said we should have armed Ukraine much earlier and much stronger than we did. And that's obvious now in hindsight. Apparently, it was such a great intelligence coup. As somebody I think described, it was almost like America had their own person inside the Kremlin war room, looking at the maps and plotting strategy, because the U.S. knew exactly what was going to happen.
Speaking of this amazing intel that the Americans had about the Russian invasion plans, there's of course another question here, is that we all know by now, because you've been talking about it in some detail, that Harris went and presented that, and Zelensky literally told her that he didn't believe it. I mean, they tell Zelensky that we know he's had this plan to invade your country, and Zelensky just says, I don't believe it. I mean, how do we understand that?
I don't. I mean, it's very disappointing that Zelensky did not prepare. All I can say is I was the victim of Zelensky's arrogance, people in this administration, and the old key post was. But we have to go back to A, his inexperience, B, his courtship. He ran on like he was going to do a deal with Russia, and then he found out he couldn't. I'm still shocked, I think, by their own arrogance. One of the biggest failures that they had in this war was not to prepare the country many failures, not to prepare the country, not to fight corruption. Oh, and the manpower thing. How they thought that they were going to beat back over the long term the big Russian army with the size of the force that they're fielding now. I mean, I'm reading today's news reports. I mean, it's the commanders in Volodar, which was the Russians recently took over, said we were outnumbered 10-1. And he says, I'm not talking just about soldiers, I'm talking about equipment. How is Ukraine going to, come back from that? We've talked about this before. It's part that the West has to be all in and is definitely not all in, and part that Ukraine has to be all in, and Ukraine is definitely not all in. I can tell you that. So Ukraine doesn't have as many friends, actually, even in Europe, as it needs, and it's going into a very, very difficult situation. I think Kamala Harris didn't do herself a big favor in her media blitz, where she said, "I really can't think of any differences I had with Joe Biden," and I can't imagine that. If that's true, that's going to be very welcome here in Kiev, because people, are very supportive of Biden compared to Donald Trump, who they think is just going to cut the nation loose. But Biden has also spoken of disparagingly because of this, what they call the slow death, like enough to stay in the fight, not enough to win. I mean, the other thing, related in the book is we still, what's up with Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin? And now we hear they've talked 7 times since Trump left the White House. The Kremlin says no. That weird bromance that they have, and this weird, Vladimir Putin's ability to play Donald Trump, I think, is the most dangerous factor facing Ukraine if Trump, God forbid, gets back in. So there's a lot of things to digest in that book. But again, Michael, it's not things that we didn't know or didn't live through, right? I mean, we knew the West response was weak. We knew Trump was toadying up to Vladimir Putin. We knew Obama, was weak. We knew Zelensky wasn't doing anything about corruption and wasn't taking the war. Well, Ukraine in general wasn't where it needed to be in 2022.
The one thing the first thing I thought about when I heard that Biden was throwing Obama under the bus, I remember when Obama in 2012 cracked that joke against or about Mitt Romney. Romney talking about Putin being the biggest threat to American security and world security. And Obama in a debate said Mitt Romney, the 1980s have just called you. They want their foreign policy back. Again, I'm not a big fan of Mitt Romney, but 12 years later, you'd have to say he's been pretty much vindicated, and Obama basically looks like he had no bloody clue.
Yeah, the late great John McCain looks very good now. You know, as a Democrat and an Obama supporter, he looks worse over time, especially in foreign policy. Too cool, too know-it-all when he didn't know enough about the world, obviously. Too dismissive of Vladimir Putin's threat to the world, obviously.